Hey guys, so welcome to what I am christening Paranormal Monday. So I got inspired by one of the YouTubers that I follow to share with you guys some of the paranormal experiences I've had, because I've had quite a few, and if you've been with me watching my videos long enough, you've kind of gotten glimpses of some of them, but not quite the whole story. So I thought I would share my collective paranormal experiences with you today and the next 3 following Mondays, and I thought it would just be fun for the month of February to do Paranormal Monday every Monday. So something I really want to stress to you guys as we start on this Paranormal Monday journey is the thing about the paranormal world is it's very unknown. I mean, there's so much about it we don't know, and something I need to stress because it is so true, and I mean, you have to live through it to find out, but the more you open yourself up to the paranormal world, the more it gets through. It's just the more open to it, more open to believing in it you are, the more into accepting signs and voices and anything from the other side, the more is going to come through. That's why as I talk about my paranormal experiences, you'll see that some areas of some points in my life are more active than others. Just like the last 3 years of my life have not been very active paranormally, because I've tried to kind of shut that side down, because as you'll find out in one of my later videos, when you are open to the paranormal and stuff starts to come through, it doesn't just interact with you. It will interact and reach out to those around you. And at the point in my life where I'm at, I'm not comfortable with that happening to people like, say, my husband. It seems like right from the get-go, when I was about 2 or 3, I started having night terrors so bad that my parents all they could do was just hold me down, because they couldn't wake me up, and I would just scream and thrash and kick, and all they could do was hold me down until the night terror passed. And I had those for a year or 2 when I was really young, when we still lived in North Dakota. And once we moved to South Dakota, I was 6. I just turned 6, and everything seemed pretty normal for a few years, but then we moved across the street from my grandparents, and pretty much my paranormal history started with that house. So there's always been something in my grandmother's house. Over the years, I've discovered more about what it is, kind of. I mean, that sounds kind of weird to say, but because I still don't know details. I've tried looking up if anything ever happened in that house, and I couldn't really find anything. But from my experiences in that house, there is something very evil. But there are other spirits there that are not. They're very friendly. They're very open to communication. But the first thing I remember about that house is there being something very evil in it. That house just always had kind of a dark energy. Even as a little kid, I never really wanted to be alone in any part of the house for very long. Even going to the bathroom, I didn't want to be alone in there for very long. But there were also like little playful things, like my grandmother would find silverware in the basement where they did their laundry, and that made no sense because there was no one that was taking silverware down into the basement, and she just blew it off because she doesn't believe in this kind of stuff. So she just blew it off as it just somehow ended up down there. One time I remember we were sitting around my grandparents' table, which we did a lot, just talking, and all of a sudden we hear music, like from a music box, and we'd been sitting there for hours, and just all of a sudden we hear this music from a music box playing, and so we followed it upstairs, and in one of their little attic closets where they keep their Christmas stuff, one of their Christmas like decoration music things that you like turn the knob and it plays music, it was just going off for no reason. I mean, it wasn't anywhere near Christmas, so it'd been sitting up there for months not being touched. So there was no reason for it to be playing. So when I was younger, not a lot of stuff happened to me in my grandmother's house. My brother Chris, which you guys should know pretty well by now, he has a pretty dark, pretty terrifying story about something that happened to him in my grandparents' house. And I don't know how many people he has shared it with, but it's pretty terrifying. And it didn't stop him from going back in the house ever, but I think it did give him pause for a little while anyway. And I'm not going to tell that story. That is his story to tell. I will tell you my stories. So the first scary thing that ever happened to me didn't actually have to do with my grandparents' house. It was on the same block as my grandparents' house, but so I was probably about 9 years old, and at the very end of my grandparents' block there was a clinic where you just, go see doctors, pick up prescriptions, stuff like that, just your everyday clinic. And at the end of the parking lot nearest the sidewalk on this block, there always sat this little blue car, and it had always been there since the time I moved there. I think the clinic used it every once in a while for drug runs to patients who couldn't leave their houses, stuff like that. And so one day a bunch of us, my two best friends at the time who were twins, and I think my brother and one of his friends, were all riding our bikes around, and one of the twins and I decided we were gonna go ride around the clinic parking lot. And so we'd been riding around the clinic parking lot for a few minutes, and then we decided to circle around the block and come back to the clinic parking lot. And everything seemed normal. The little blue car was sitting there like it always was. And then we circled around the block and we came back through the parking lot. And we didn't notice it at the time, but the blue car was gone. So we circled around the parking lot a few times when all of a sudden the blue car comes roaring out of the alley that connected part of the clinic to the rest of the block. And it came bearing down at us. And I remember looking back, and it's a very distinctive memory in my mind, but I remember looking back and looking at the driver of the car, and all I could see was shoulders and up, because it's just all the view that the dashboard gave me. And I remember she was as pale as can be, and her eyes were just this vivid bright. I couldn't tell you even what color they were, but they were just vividly bright, and her hair was really red. And there was just this look of absolute rage on her face as she chased us out of the parking lot. And so, we just gunned it out of the parking lot and got onto the sidewalk and rolled the rest of the way down the block back towards my grandparents' house, and then across the street was our house, where everyone else was waiting with their bikes. And so, we get there and we're out of breath and we're freaking out because some chick just chased us like crazy around the parking lot, and she didn't look right. She just did not look right. And so we got back to the rest of our group, and we were telling them what happened, and they're like, well, yeah, no, that does seem strange because that blue car has been circling our block for the last 5 minutes. And my friend and I were looking at him, we're like, that's not possible because the blue car has been sitting in the parking lot. It hadn't moved until we disappeared around the block and came back and didn't notice right away it was gone. So it's that may seem like a silly story, but it is the first paranormal thing that happened to me personally that I can remember, because it's just whatever was driving that car wasn't human, I can tell you that, or wasn't alive anyway. And just the whole fact that our friends had watched this car circling in the parking lot when we had seen that blue car sitting in the parking lot while we were riding our bikes around just makes it, in my opinion, very paranormal. And yeah, so I can't explain what happened. After that, we didn't ride around the clinic parking lot anymore, that's for sure. But But yeah, that was like the first big paranormal thing that ever happened to me. And I know it might not sound like crazy interesting, and I promise you, the stories get better. They get a little more ghosty and crazier. But yeah, that was pretty much the first big thing that got me thinking that maybe everything in this life and everything we see isn't completely what it seems, or we can't quite see everything that there is out there. So the next story I'm going to tell you has to involve those same twins. So they moved away, they moved out of their house at least a couple of years after that parking lot incident, and they moved into a house across town. And so one night on their birthday, we had a big old birthday party, and it was going to be a slumber party. And I can't think, I must have been 11 or 12 at the time, I think. Must have been. And so I was over at their house, and there was a bunch of us girls, and we'd had so much fun. We'd done presents and cake and all that birthday party girly stuff. And so it was getting more towards the end of the night, and we're winding down, and we're trying to come up with things to do, and someone gets the brilliant idea that we should do stiff as a board, light as a feather. Now, I know that this is like a childish game that people play, but I do not recommend you ever playing it. I feel the same way about Ouija boards. It's like, just don't do it. So we're sitting around, and one of the twins is being the board, and we had two friends stationed at her head and her feet with their fingers under her, you know, like you do. And then someone else got the brilliant idea, hey, for more like energy or whatever, how about two of us sit like a few feet away from you and hold hands and chant while you do that. So I was one of the lucky ones that was sitting a little ways away holding hands with the other twin. And so we were sitting there and in this dark bedroom, and we were chanting stiff as a board, light as a feather over and over and over again. And not a whole lot seemed to be happening, and then all of a sudden I very clearly remember our hands, myself and the twin that we were holding hands, our hands started to vibrate. Like it felt like we were both holding like something vibrating in our hands. And I remember that it was starting to freak me out, but we kept chanting, and then all of a sudden we all the girls in the room, because it stopped our chanting, we heard this growl in the corner of the room. And I mean, seriously, like evil growl. And we all just stopped. And it had to have been probably the best timing of anyone ever. I don't know if he was like listening outside the door, which was on the clear other side of the room of the growl, and just heard like a stop chanting or what, but the twins' brother just started banging on the door and scares all of me. I'll scream. And yeah, pretty much ended it for right then. So we're all like, oh, that was funny and stupid and scary. Anyway, let's go do something else. So we decided to just go like take a walk around the block, and the girl that was being the board, stiff as board, light as feather, the one twin, she started acting really weird. Like she wouldn't talk to anyone, and she just kind of had this dazed, confused, pale look about her, and just wouldn't even barely acknowledge we existed. And finally, like halfway through our walk, she just went over and she sat on the curb. And she wouldn't talk to anyone, she just sat there. And so finally I go over and I'm like, Caitlin, what is going on? Are you okay? And she looked at me, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She was just so terrified. And she looked at me and she's like, Shannon, when we were doing the stiff as a board, light as a feather, I just remember seeing things like dolls, and they had no eyes, and I'm just really scared. And like I was pretty shaken. I was like, okay, we really should not have done that. That was a stupid idea. We should just go back to the house and just chill out and forget this ever happened. So I'm like, we should just go back to the house. So we all start walking, and she's still just acting really weird and looking up at the clouds and saying that something's wrong, something's gonna happen. And at that point I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm sorry guys, but I am out. So at that point, I called my dad and I'm like, I would like to come home now if that's okay. And so that's where the night ended for me. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed the whole night. I'm kind of glad I never got to find out. So yeah, I don't know if my friend was like partially possessed or oppressed or what it was, but that was pretty terrifying night for me. I remember not sleeping very well that night, and yeah, it was I suggest you never play that game and never play with a Ouija board. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Alright guys, that is it for this first video of Paranormal Monday. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm even going to say that the first few ghost stories in this video that I had for you are a little lame, but my paranormal experiences do get a lot bigger and more intense, so yeah. Alright, I will see you on Friday.